The Assayer's arrival. The morning came cold and gray, with clouds hanging low over Medicine Hat like a threat waiting to be spoken. James woke before dawn in Dr. Harrison's guest room, his shoulder aching from where he'd slept wrong on it, the old bullet wound reminding him it would never fully heal. Eleanor was already awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked quietly. She turned her head toward him. "I kept thinking about what happens if Brennan doesn't come. Or if he does come and tells us the ore isn't worth what we need. Then we'll find another way. Will we?" Her voice was flat, exhausted. "James, we've been finding other ways for months now, fighting and running and barely surviving. Sometimes I wonder if there's a limit to how many times we can pull ourselves back from the edge." He reached for her hand in the darkness. "We're not at the edge anymore. We're here, together, with ore in the bank vault, and a man coming who might help us turn it into something real. Or who might tell us we've risked everything for nothing." James had no answer to that. The fear was legitimate. They'd staked everything on silver ore they couldn't properly assess themselves, extracted through dangerous labor from a mine shaft that could have collapsed at any moment. If Brennan declared it low-grade or contaminated or simply insufficient, the entire gamble would have been for nothing. Footsteps in the hallway, Sarah's distinctive stride, purposeful even at this hour, a soft knock at their door. "Come in," Eleanor said, sitting up. Sarah entered carrying a lamp, already dressed. Her face was composed, but her eyes showed the same sleeplessness they all felt. "Mrs. Brennan is up making breakfast. She says the stage from Lethbridge usually arrives around 8 o'clock, assuming it's on time." "And if it's not?" James asked. "Then we wait." Sarah set the lamp on the dresser. "Daniel's already at the livery, watching the road. He'll come tell us the moment he sees anything." Eleanor swung her legs out of bed. "Is Thomas awake?" "Still sleeping. I thought we'd let him rest as long as possible." James nodded approval. The boy had been quiet yesterday, absorbing the tension without fully understanding it. Better to let him sleep while the adults managed their anxiety. They dressed in silence and joined Mrs. Brennan in the kitchen, where the housekeeper was frying bacon and eggs with practiced efficiency. Dr. Harrison was already at the table, reading a week-old newspaper from Calgary. "Good morning," he said, looking up. "Any word?" "Not yet," James replied, accepting the coffee Mrs. Brennan poured for him. "We're hoping the stage is punctual." "In my experience, the Lethbridge run is usually reliable. The driver's been doing it for years." Harrison folded his newspaper. "I've been thinking about the bridge loan arrangements. If Brennan's assessment is favorable, I can have 3 local investors here by this afternoon. Men I trust who understand the opportunity and won't ask uncomfortable questions." "How much do you think they'd advance?" Eleanor asked. "Against proven silver ore? Enough to cover your banknote and provide working capital for proper extraction equipment. We'd structure it as a percentage of future mining profits, rather than a fixed loan. Keeps the terms flexible." Sarah sat down with her own coffee. "What if the consortium tries to interfere with the investors?" Harrison smiled grimly. "These are men who've built their fortunes on this frontier by being stubborn and independent. They don't take kindly to pressure from Toronto businessmen. If anything, consortium interference would make them more determined to help you out of pure spite." They ate breakfast in relative quiet, each person managing their own anxiety. Thomas woke and joined them, still drowsy, but sensing the importance of the day. Mrs. Brennan fussed over him with extra bacon and jam for his bread. The morning dragged. 7 o'clock passed, then 7:30. James found himself pacing between the parlor window and the kitchen, watching the street for any sign of Daniel or the stage. Eleanor sat with Thomas, helping him with his arithmetic lessons as a distraction. Sarah cleaned her rifle for the 3rd time, the repetitive motion clearly soothing her nerves. At 8:15, Daniel appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless. "Stage is coming. I saw it crossing the river bridge." James felt his heart kick against his ribs. "How many passengers?" "Couldn't tell from that distance, but it's definitely the Lethbridge stage." They gathered their coats and hats. Dr. Harrison led them toward the main street where the stage depot sat beside the telegraph office. A small crowd had already gathered. the usual mix of merchants, homesteaders, and curious townspeople who treated the stage's arrival as entertainment. The coach appeared around the corner, pulled by 6 horses showing the strain of the journey. The driver, a weathered man with a gray beard, brought them to a precise stop in front of the depot. The door opened, and passengers began to emerge. First was a woman in a traveling dress, helped down by the driver. Then a young man carrying a sample case, probably a drummer selling goods to the local stores. Then nothing. James felt his stomach sink. Had Brennan not received the telegram? Had he decided the journey wasn't worth his time? Then a third figure appeared in the doorway, a compact man in his late 50s with iron gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. He wore practical traveling clothes and carried a worn leather satchel. His eyes scanned the crowd with the careful assessment of someone who'd learned to read people and situations quickly. "That's him," Daniel said quietly. "Has to be." The man stepped down from the stage and immediately looked in their direction, as if he'd been told what to watch for. James started forward, Eleanor beside him. "Mr. Brennan?" James asked. The man studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You'd be Mackenzie, then. Got your telegram 4 days ago." His voice was gravely, with traces of an American accent softened by years in the territories. "Rode hard to get here. Your message said it was urgent." "It is. Thank you for coming." James extended his hand, and Brennan shook it firmly. "This is my wife Eleanor, my daughter Sarah, and our friend Daniel Thornton. Dr. Harrison, you may remember. He said you'd worked together before." Brennan's weathered face creased into a slight smile when he saw Harrison. "Doc, been a while. Still patching up miners who don't know when to quit?" "Among other things. Welcome to Medicine Hat, Josiah." Brennan retrieved a second, heavier bag from the stage driver. "So? You've got ore you need assessed, and you need it done yesterday. What's the urgency?" James glanced at the curious onlookers nearby. "Perhaps we could discuss the details somewhere more private?" "Fair enough. Lead the way." They returned to Dr. Harrison's house, where Mrs. Brennan had coffee and fresh bread waiting. Josiah Brennan accepted both gratefully, settling into a chair with the ease of a man accustomed to making himself comfortable wherever he landed. "Now then," he said, wrapping his hands around the coffee cup. "Tell me what I'm dealing with." James laid it out, the discovery of the mine on their property, the consortium's attempts to take it through violence and legal manipulation, the desperate need to extract ore and convert it to cash before the bank foreclosed. He kept it factual, avoiding melodrama, but the story's weight was evident in every sentence. Brennan listened without interruption, his expression unchanging. When James finished, the assayer was quiet for a long moment. "You're telling me you've got 1,000 pounds of ore in the bank vault, extracted by hand from a shaft 20 feet deep, and you need to know if it's worth enough to save your homestead from foreclosure in 7 days. "That's right. And there are powerful men who'd prefer you didn't succeed." "Yes." Brennan took a long drink of coffee. "Well, that's a hell of a situation." He set down the cup. "Let's see this ore." The walk to the bank was tense. James kept watching for watchers, for any sign that the consortium's agents were observing their movements. He saw nothing obvious, but that meant little. The consortium had proven adept at surveillance. Cornelius Webb was at his desk when they entered, his face tightening when he saw their group. His eyes lingered on Brennan with obvious unease. "Mr. Mackenzie, how can I help you?" "We need access to the vault. Mr. Brennan here needs to examine the ore we deposited yesterday." Webb's jaw worked. "That's highly irregular. Bank policy." "Bank policy allows depositors to access their property in the vault," Harrison interrupted smoothly. "Unless you're suggesting the ore isn't safe in your custody, Cornelius?" The implied threat hung in the air. Webb's face reddened, but he stood and retrieved the vault keys from his desk drawer. "Of course. This way." The vault was cool and dim, lined with safe deposit boxes and a few larger items stored on shelves. Their ore sat in canvas sacks exactly where they'd left it, seemingly undisturbed. Brennan knelt beside the sacks and opened one, running his fingers through the rocky chunks inside. His expression remained neutral, professional. He selected several pieces, examining them in the light from the vault door, turning them over, studying the visible silver veins. He pulled a small magnifying glass from his satchel and peered at the ore more closely. Can I take samples? He asked. Of course, James said. Brennan selected half a dozen pieces of varying size and appearance, placing them carefully in a separate cloth bag. I'll need to run proper assays. Fire assay for accuracy. That'll take most of the day. Where can I work? The livery has a forge, Daniel offered. Cooper won't mind if you use it. That'll do. Brennan stood, dusting off his hands. He looked at James directly. I can give you a preliminary assessment based on visual inspection, but you understand that's not binding. The fire assay will tell us exactly what you've got. I understand. All right then. Brennan gestured toward the sacks. Based on what I'm seeing, this is high-grade silver ore. Very high-grade. The veins are thick and well distributed through the quartz matrix. If the assay confirms what my eyes are telling me, you've got something valuable here. James felt Eleanor's hand grip his arm. How valuable? Can't give you numbers until I run the tests, but I'll say this. I've been assaying ore for 30 years, and this is some of the richest silver-bearing rock I've seen outside of the Comstock. If the rest of your sacks are like this sample, you've got considerably more than what you need to clear your banknote. The relief was so intense, it was almost painful. James heard Sarah exhale sharply beside him. Eleanor was trembling. Thank you, James managed. Thank you for coming. Brennan's weathered face showed something that might have been sympathy. Don't thank me yet. We've still got work to do, and you've still got people who don't want you to succeed. Let's get through the assay first. They left the bank and walked to the livery, where Cooper proved as accommodating as Daniel had predicted. Within an hour, Brennan had set up a makeshift assay operation in the corner of the forge, arranging his equipment with the efficiency of long practice. This'll take 6 to 8 hours, he explained. I'll run multiple samples to get an accurate average. You folks don't need to hover. I know my business. We'll be at Dr. Harrison's, James said. Send word when you're finished? Will do. The afternoon was agony. They returned to Harrison's house and tried to occupy themselves, but the waiting was excruciating. Thomas played with wooden blocks on the parlor floor, building and rebuilding structures with focused determination. Eleanor attempted needlework, but kept losing her place. Sarah sat by the window, ostensibly reading, but clearly watching the street. James found himself in the kitchen with Dr. Harrison, ostensibly discussing the bridge loan arrangements, but mostly just talking to fill the silence. Even if the assay is favorable, Harrison said quietly, you understand the consortium won't simply accept defeat. I know. They'll look for other angles, legal challenges perhaps, or they might try to interfere with the refining process or the sale of the silver. Men with that much money and that few scruples don't give up easily. What do you suggest? Harrison considered. Document everything. Multiple copies of the assay results, stored in different locations. Have witnesses present for every transaction. Make the paper trail so solid that even the best lawyers can't unravel it. And watch your backs, literally. These men have already proven willing to kill. Thomas Garrett, the Pinkerton detective Blackburn's agency is sending, should arrive within the week. That'll help. Perhaps. But detectives can be killed too, as Blackburn proved. You need to be ready to defend yourselves until proper law arrives. James nodded slowly. The violence of the summer had taught them that lesson thoroughly. They'd survived this long by being willing to fight when necessary. The afternoon shadows were lengthening when Daniel appeared at the door, slightly out of breath. Brennan's finished. Says he needs to speak with you at the livery. They grabbed their coats and hurried through the cooling evening air. The forge was still warm when they entered, and Brennan stood beside his equipment, making notes in a small leather journal. He looked up as they approached. Results are conclusive, he said without preamble. Your ore averages 847 ounces of silver per ton. That's exceptional, some of the richest I've ever tested. James felt the world tilt slightly. What does that mean in practical terms? Brennan consulted his notes. Your 1,000 pounds of ore contains approximately 423 ounces of pure silver. At current market rates of roughly $1.29 per ounce, that's $545 worth of refined silver. Subtract refining costs and transportation, you're looking at clearing around $480 net, more than double what they owed the bank. More than enough to clear the debt with capital left over. That's assuming, Brennan continued, that the refining is done properly and you can get fair market price for the silver. I can handle the refining myself if you're willing to transport the ore to Fort Benton. Or we could try to arrange something here in Medicine Hat, though the facilities are limited. How long would the refining take? Eleanor asked. In Fort Benton, with proper equipment, 3 days, maybe 4. Here, improvising could be a week or more, and the results wouldn't be as clean. James calculated quickly. We have 7 days until the bank deadline. If we left tomorrow with the ore, that's 2 days to Fort Benton, 4 days for refining, 2 days back, 8 days total. Too long. Unless, Harrison interjected, we arrange the bridge loan based on Brennan's assay. Pay the bank immediately with borrowed funds, then use the refined silver to repay the investors. That gives you the time you need, without the deadline pressure. Brennan nodded approvingly. Smart. And I'll put my assessment in writing, signed and witnessed. Any reputable investor would accept that as collateral. How soon can you have the documentation ready? James asked. Give me an hour. I'll prepare 3 copies. 1 for you, 1 for the investors, 1 for your records to store separately. As Brennan returned to his work, James pulled his family aside. This is it. We've got proof the ore is valuable. We can get the loan, pay the bank, and buy ourselves time to properly extract and refine the silver. The consortium will know as soon as we approach investors, Sarah said quietly. They'll try to interfere. Let them try. James heard the steel in his own voice. We've got documentation, witnesses, and the law on our side. They can't simply steal what's ours, not anymore. Eleanor touched his arm. James, they've killed for less than this. We need to be careful. We will be, but we're not backing down, not when we're this close. An hour later, Brennan handed James 3 thick envelopes, each containing his detailed assay report complete with methodology, results, and professional certification. His signature was bold across the bottom of each page. Guard these, he said. They're worth more than the silver right now. They're proof of what you've got and what it's worth. Anyone tries to claim otherwise, you've got my professional reputation backing you up. Thank you, James said, shaking the assayer's hand. Truly. You've given us a fighting chance. Brennan's weathered face showed something like respect. You folks have grit. Reminds me of the old days, when the territories were full of people willing to work and fight for what was theirs. Don't see that as much anymore. He hefted his satchel. I'll be staying at the Railroad Hotel tonight, heading back to Fort Benton tomorrow. If you need anything else, send word. They walked back through the gathering darkness, James carrying the precious envelopes inside his coat. The street was quiet, most people already home for supper. But as they passed the alley beside the general store, James caught movement from the corner of his eye. A man stood in the shadows watching them. When James turned to look directly at him, the figure didn't move or try to hide, just stood there, letting himself be seen. A message, we're still here, still watching. James kept walking, but his hand moved to the revolver at his belt. Beside him, Sarah had noticed too. Her posture had shifted subtly, ready for trouble. They reached Dr. Harrison's house without incident. Inside, the doctor was already drafting messages to his investor contacts. I'll have them here first thing tomorrow morning. With Brennan's assay, this should be straightforward. That night, after Thomas was asleep and Eleanor had finally dozed off beside him, James stood at the window, looking out at the darkened street. Somewhere out there, the consortium's agents were watching, planning, trying to find an angle to stop what was now inevitable. But they had the assay. They had proof of value. They had allies and witnesses and documentation that couldn't be easily dismissed or destroyed. For the first time in months, James allowed himself to feel something like hope. And then in the distance, he saw it. A flicker of orange light against the night sky, too bright and too sustained to be a lamp or campfire. Fire. Something was burning. His blood went cold. The direction was wrong for the business district. That light was coming from the north edge of town, where the bank stood. James was moving before conscious thought caught up, grabbing his coat and gun, shouting for Daniel and Harrison. Behind him, he heard Eleanor wake, confused and alarmed. Stay here, he commanded. Keep Thomas safe. Sarah, watch the house. He was out the door and running before anyone could argue, Daniel and Harrison close behind him. Other men were emerging from houses, drawn by the glow and the smell of smoke on the wind. They rounded the corner onto Main Street, and James's worst fears were confirmed. The bank was ablaze, flames already consuming the wooden upper floor and licking at the brick walls. The heat was intense even from across the street. "The vault," James gasped. "Our ore." Harrison grabbed his arm as James started forward. "You can't go in there. The building's lost." "But the ore." "The vault's brick and steel. The fire won't reach it. But if you go in now, you'll die." James stood helpless, watching their salvation burn. Around them, townspeople formed bucket brigades from the nearby water troughs, but it was obviously futile. The bank was going to burn to the ground. Cornelius Webb stood across the street, his face illuminated by the flames, and James couldn't read his expression. Shock? Guilt? Relief? And then, at the edge of the crowd, James saw him, the same man who'd been watching from the alley earlier. This time, the man smiled, tipped his hat in mocking salute, and disappeared into the darkness. The consortium had made their move, and James realized with sick certainty that the battle was far from over.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.